I sit here now, in the dim light of my small living room, surrounded by the echoes of a life once vibrant. The weight of silence presses down on me, a heavy blanket that suffocates my thoughts. I can feel the shadows of my past creeping in, whispering secrets that have long been buried. Today, I am at my lowest point, stripped of my independence and my voice, the very essence of who I am. The world outside my window continues to spin, oblivious to my struggles, while I feel like a ghost haunting the remnants of my own life. Before I continue, I want to invite you to share something with me. Tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to know how far my story reaches, how many lives are touched by the struggles we all face, even in our golden years. I never imagined I would end up here, feeling so utterly invisible. The years have a way of stealing not just our youth, but our sense of self. I used to be someone who laughed, who loved, who fought fiercely for what I believed in. But now, as I sit in this chair, I feel like a forgotten relic, a mere observer in a world that has moved on without me. They took my keys, my freedom, my voice, and in doing so, they took a piece of my soul. I remember the day they told me I could no longer drive. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind that usually filled me with warmth and hope. I had just returned from my weekly grocery shopping, the scent of fresh produce still lingering in the air. I was proud of my independence, the ability to navigate the world on my own terms. But that day, my son, David, sat me down with a seriousness that made my heart sink. "Mom, I think it's time we talk about your driving," he said, his voice trembling slightly. I felt a rush of indignation mixed with fear. "What do you mean? I'm perfectly capable of driving," I shot back, the words spilling out before I could stop them. But deep down, a small voice whispered that maybe he was right. I had noticed the way my reflexes had slowed, how my vision wasn't quite what it used to be. Still, the thought of surrendering my keys felt like a death sentence. "Mom, it's for your safety," David urged, his eyes pleading with me to understand. "You've had a few close calls lately. I can't bear the thought of something happening to you." The sincerity in his voice cut through my defenses, but it also ignited a fire within me. I wasn't ready to be put out to pasture, to be treated like a child who needed protecting. I felt my heart race, not from fear of the road, but from the indignity of it all. That moment marked the beginning of my descent into a world where I felt increasingly marginalized. With each passing day, I felt the walls closing in around me. The once lively conversations with friends dwindled to polite nods and forced smiles. I became acutely aware of how people looked through me, as if I were a piece of furniture rather than a person with a rich history and a heart that still beat with passion. It was during one of those lonely afternoons, as I sat in my favorite armchair, that I stumbled upon an old photo album tucked away in a dusty corner of my closet. The leather cover was cracked and the pages were yellowed with age, but as I opened it, the memories came rushing back like a flood. There I was, a young woman full of life, standing on the beach with my best friend, laughing as the waves crashed around us. I could almost hear the sound of our laughter, the carefree joy that seemed so distant now. As I flipped through the pages, I saw faces of loved ones long gone, moments frozen in time that told the story of my life. There was my wedding day, the way my husband looked at me with such adoration, and the day I held my first child in my arms, feeling an overwhelming sense of love and responsibility. But with each memory came the realization of what I had lost: my husband, my friends, my sense of purpose. The ache in my chest deepened, and I couldn't help but wonder how I had ended up in this lonely existence. The more I delved into the album, the more I felt a stirring within me. I began to remember the woman I used to be, the fighter, the dreamer, the one who refused to back down in the face of adversity. I remembered my passion for painting, how I would lose myself for hours in the strokes of my brush, creating worlds where I could escape the harshness of reality. But somewhere along the way, I had let those dreams slip away, buried beneath the weight of societal expectations and the roles I had played for so long. As I closed the album, a flicker of determination ignited within me. I realized that I could not let them take everything from me. I had to reclaim my voice, my freedom, my very essence. But how? The question lingered in the air, heavy with possibility and uncertainty. I knew I had to dig deeper into my past to unearth the secrets that had shaped my life and brought me to this moment of despair. I began to search through old boxes, looking for anything that might hold a clue to the woman I once was. I found letters from friends, faded postcards from trips I had taken, and even a few of my old sketches. Each item was a thread connecting me to a life I had almost forgotten. But there was one thing that eluded me, a deeper understanding of the family secrets that had haunted me for years. My mother had always been tight-lipped about our history, leaving me with more questions than answers. "Why didn't you ever tell me about our family?" I had asked her once, frustration bubbling to the surface. "What are you hiding?" But she would only shake her head, her eyes clouded with sorrow. "Some things are better left in the past, dear," she would reply, her voice barely above a whisper. Those words haunted me, and now, as I sifted through my belongings, I felt a burning need to uncover the truth. What had my mother kept from me? What secrets lay buried beneath the surface of our family history? I knew that finding the answers would not only help me reclaim my identity, but might also shed light on the darkness that had surrounded us for so long. As I embarked on this journey of discovery, I felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Each day brought new revelations, and with them, a growing sense of purpose. I began to piece together fragments of my family's past, stories of struggle, resilience, and unspoken pain. I learned about my grandmother, a woman who had fought against the odds to provide for her children, and my mother, who had carried the weight of those struggles silently. In the midst of my investigation, I found a small, ornate box tucked away in the attic. It was covered in dust, and as I opened it, I felt a shiver run down my spine. Inside lay a collection of letters, yellowed with age, tied together with a fraying ribbon. My heart raced as I carefully unwrapped them, each letter a glimpse into the lives of those who had come before me. As I read through the letters, I felt as though I were stepping into a different world, a world filled with love, loss, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Each word resonated with my own experiences, echoing the struggles I faced in my own life. There were letters of longing, of hope, and of dreams unfulfilled. But there was also an undercurrent of pain, a reminder that the past was not always as simple as it seemed. With each letter, the pieces of my family's story began to fall into place. I learned about the sacrifices made by my ancestors, the injustices they faced, and the secrets they carried. It was a tapestry woven with threads of sorrow and resilience, a reflection of the strength that ran through our bloodline. But just as I felt I was getting closer to understanding my family's legacy, a chilling realization struck me. The more I uncovered, the more I felt the weight of those secrets pressing down on me. What if the truth was too painful to bear? What if it shattered the fragile sense of self I had begun to rebuild? The fear of what lay ahead gripped me, but I knew I had to press on. I could not allow fear to dictate my journey any longer. As I continued to unravel the threads of my family's past, I found myself standing at a crossroads. I could either retreat into the safety of ignorance, allowing the shadows of my past to dictate my present, or I could confront the truth head-on, no matter how painful it might be. I chose the latter, fueled by a newfound determination to reclaim my voice and my identity. I began to reach out to distant relatives, searching for connections that might lead me closer to the truth. Each conversation was filled with a mix of hope and apprehension as I navigated the delicate web of family dynamics. Some were eager to share their stories, while others were guarded, hesitant to revisit the pain of the past. But with each connection, I felt a sense of empowerment growing within me. I became a seeker of truth, digging deeper into my family's history, and with each revelation, I felt the shackles of my past begin to loosen. I discovered that my grandmother had been a fierce advocate for women's rights, fighting for equality in a world that sought to silence her. Her courage inspired me, igniting a fire within me that I had thought long extinguished. And then, one fateful afternoon, as I was sifting through old family records, I stumbled upon a name that sent chills down my spine. It was a name I had heard whispered in hushed tones, a name that had been shrouded in mystery for as long as I could remember. Suddenly, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, and I felt a rush of adrenaline course through my veins. The truth was within my grasp, but it came with a price. As I sat there, staring at the name on the page, I knew that my journey was far from over. I had unearthed the beginnings of a story that would change everything I thought I knew about my family. But I also knew that confronting the truth would require courage, strength, and an unwavering commitment to reclaiming my voice. The shadows of my past may have taken my keys, my freedom, and my voice, but they could not take away my spirit. I was determined to rise from the ashes of my despair, to uncover the secrets that had held me captive for far too long. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but I was ready to embrace it, to reclaim everything that had been taken from me. As I look back on this moment, I realize that it was the catalyst for my transformation. I was no longer a passive observer in my own life. I was a woman on a mission, ready to confront the demons of my past and reclaim my narrative. The road ahead would not be easy, but I was driven by a fierce desire to uncover the truth and find my place in a world that had tried to silence me. And so I embarked on this journey of self-discovery, fueled by the memories of those who had come before me and the unyielding belief that I could reclaim my voice. The story of my life was far from over. It was just beginning. I spent countless days reliving my past, each memory a stone weighing heavy on my heart. As I sat in my worn armchair, the sunlight filtering through the dusty window, I felt the shadows of my life wrap around me. They whispered secrets I had long tried to forget, secrets that had shaped my existence and stripped me of my voice. I was no longer just an elderly woman. I was a vessel of memories, a tapestry woven with threads of sorrow and resilience. I often found myself staring at the family photographs lining the walls, each frame a window into a world that felt both familiar and foreign. The faces smiled back at me, yet I knew the stories behind those smiles were filled with pain. My mother, with her bright eyes and hopeful demeanor, had faced her own battles. She had been a woman of strength, yet I remembered the moments when despair clouded her spirit. She had whispered to me about the importance of standing tall, even when the world tried to bring us down. But how could I stand tall when the very foundation of my life felt as if it had crumbled beneath me? I recalled the day I first felt the sting of abandonment. I was just a child then, barely able to comprehend the weight of my mother's absence. She had left for what she called a better life, a phrase that echoed in my mind like a haunting melody. I had waited by the window, my small hands pressed against the glass, hoping to see her return. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, I felt the warmth of her love fade into the coldness of reality. The world outside continued to spin, but my heart felt frozen in time. My father, a man who had once been my hero, became a shadow of his former self. He struggled with his own demons, drowning his sorrows in a bottle that seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. I remember the nights when the silence of our home was pierced by the sound of his anguished cries. I would curl up in my bed, clutching my teddy bear tightly, wishing for the comfort of my mother's arms. But those arms never came, and I was left to navigate the storm alone. As I grew older, the weight of my childhood experiences began to shape my identity. I became a caretaker, a role I embraced with both love and resentment. I wanted to be the woman my mother had hoped I would become, but the scars of my past lingered, reminding me of my worthlessness. I felt invisible, lost in a world that seemed to overlook my existence. The injustices I faced were not solely rooted in my family dynamics. Society's view of aging women was cruel and dismissive. I would often find myself sitting in waiting rooms, surrounded by younger faces that radiated vitality. I felt like a ghost, drifting through life unnoticed. The world had a way of erasing the stories of women like me, and I was determined to reclaim my narrative. I often thought about the women who came before me, those who had fought for their voices in a world that sought to silence them. My grandmother, a fierce advocate for women's rights, had faced her own battles. She had marched in the streets, her spirit unyielding in the face of adversity. I had heard stories of her bravery, of her refusal to back down, and I longed to embody that same strength. Yet I felt trapped in a cycle of despair, unable to break free from the chains that bound me to my past. One evening, as I sat in my dimly lit living room, I stumbled upon an old box tucked away in the corner. Dust danced in the air as I opened it, revealing a collection of letters tied with a frayed ribbon. My heart raced as I recognized my grandmother's handwriting. I carefully unfolded one of the letters, my fingers trembling with anticipation. The words spilled onto the page, recounting her struggles, her dreams, and her unwavering belief in the power of women. "Dear Sarah," she wrote, "the world may try to silence us, but we must never forget our worth. We are warriors, and our voices matter. Do not let the darkness of despair consume you. Fight for your truth, for it is the light that will guide you home." Tears streamed down my cheeks as I read her words. In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. My grandmother had faced her own demons, yet she had chosen to rise above them. I realized that I too had the power to reclaim my voice. I was not just a product of my past. I was a culmination of the strength that flowed through my bloodline. With renewed determination, I began to piece together my family's history. I reached out to distant relatives, searching for connections that might lead me closer to the truth. Each conversation was a delicate dance, filled with a mix of hope and apprehension. Some were eager to share their stories, while others were guarded, hesitant to revisit the pain of the past. But with each connection, I felt a sense of empowerment growing within me. I became a seeker of truth, digging deeper into my family's history, and with each revelation, I felt the shackles of my past begin to loosen. I discovered that my grandmother had been a fierce advocate for women's rights, fighting for equality in a world that sought to silence her. Her courage inspired me, igniting a fire within me that I had thought long extinguished. As I continued my investigation, I stumbled upon a photograph that would change everything. It was an old black and white image of a gathering, a group of women standing proudly together. I recognized my grandmother in the center, her smile radiant and fierce. But what caught my attention was the woman standing beside her. There was a striking resemblance, a connection that sent chills down my spine. It was my mother, a woman I had only known through fragmented memories and whispered conversations. The discovery shook me to my core. I had spent years feeling abandoned, but here was evidence of a bond that had been severed. I realized that my mother had not chosen to leave me. She had been a part of something much larger, a movement that sought to empower women. The weight of my feelings began to shift, and I could see the complexity of her choices. I felt a surge of empathy, a longing to understand her journey. With each piece of the puzzle, I began to construct a narrative that was not solely about loss, but also about resilience. I reached out to more relatives, piecing together stories that had been buried beneath the weight of shame and silence. As I listened to their tales, I discovered a legacy of strength that had been passed down through generations. Each woman had faced her own battles, yet they had emerged with a fierce determination to forge their paths. I learned about my great aunt, who had defied societal expectations to pursue a career in medicine. She had faced ridicule and skepticism, but she persisted, becoming a trailblazer for women in her field. Her story resonated with me, igniting a sense of purpose within my own heart. I realized that I could honor their struggles by reclaiming my voice and using it to inspire others. As I delved deeper into my family's history, I uncovered hidden letters and journals, each revealing fragments of a life lived in the shadows. I read about the sacrifices made, the dreams deferred, and the unyielding spirit that had carried my ancestors through their darkest days. I began to understand that their stories were not just relics of the past, they were a testament to the resilience of women who had fought against the odds. The more I learned, the more I felt the weight of my own silence. I had spent too long allowing the world to dictate my worth, too long hiding behind the facade of invisibility. It was time to step into the light, to embrace the woman I was meant to be. I began to write my own story, documenting my journey of self-discovery and the revelations that had transformed my understanding of family and identity. With each word I penned, I felt a sense of liberation. I was no longer just an elderly woman reflecting on her past. I was a storyteller, weaving together the narratives of generations. My voice, once silenced, was now a powerful force, echoing through the pages of my life. I shared my discoveries with those around me, hoping to inspire others to confront their own truths. But as I navigated this journey of healing, I realized that the shadows of my past still lingered. The pain of abandonment and the scars of invisibility were not easily erased. I found myself grappling with feelings of anger and resentment, questioning why my mother had made the choices she did. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers that had eluded me for so long. But deep down, I understood that the journey to forgiveness was a path I had to walk alone. I began to meditate on the lessons I had learned from my grandmother's letters, reminding myself that forgiveness was not about condoning the past, but about freeing myself from its grip. I wanted to break the cycle of pain that had been passed down through generations, to choose a different narrative for myself. It was a daunting task, but I was determined to reclaim my voice, to rewrite my story on my own terms. As the days turned into weeks, I found solace in the act of writing. I poured my heart onto the pages, allowing my emotions to flow freely. I wrote about the moments of joy, the laughter shared with friends, and the beauty that still existed in the world. I wrote about the pain too, acknowledging the wounds that had shaped me. In doing so, I began to feel a sense of healing, a release of the burdens I had carried for far too long. I sought out local writing groups, eager to connect with others who shared my passion for storytelling. Each meeting was a revelation, a gathering of souls who understood the power of words. We shared our stories, our triumphs, and our struggles, creating a community that celebrated vulnerability and authenticity. For the first time in years, I felt seen and heard. Through these connections, I discovered that I was not alone in my journey. Many women had faced similar battles, grappling with feelings of invisibility and abandonment. Together, we formed a support system, lifting each other up as we navigated the complexities of our lives. I realized that our shared experiences were a source of strength, a reminder that we could find hope even in the darkest of times. As I stood before my writing group one evening, sharing a piece of my story, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. The words flowed effortlessly, and I could see the impact they had on my audience. Their eyes glistened with understanding, and I felt a sense of connection that transcended the boundaries of age and experience. In that moment, I knew I had found my voice. But just as I began to embrace this newfound sense of empowerment, the shadows of my past crept back in, threatening to pull me under once more. I received a phone call that would change everything. It was from a distant relative, someone I had reached out to during my quest for truth. Their voice was shaky, filled with urgency as they revealed a piece of information that rocked me to my core. "Sarah, you need to know something about your mother," they said, their tone grave. "There are things about her past that you don't understand, things that could change everything." My heart raced as I listened, a mix of fear and curiosity coursing through my veins. What could possibly be hidden beneath the surface? I felt a knot form in my stomach, a sense of foreboding that threatened to unravel everything I had worked so hard to rebuild. The journey to reclaim my voice had led me to this moment, and I knew I had to confront whatever truth lay ahead. As I prepared to meet my relative, I felt a whirlwind of emotions swirling within me. Questions raced through my mind, each one more pressing than the last. What had my mother been hiding? What secrets had been buried for so long? I felt a sense of urgency, a need to uncover the truth that had eluded me for so many years. The meeting was set for a quiet cafe, a place that felt both familiar and foreign. As I walked through the door, I was struck by the weight of anticipation hanging in the air. My relatives sat at a corner table, their expressions serious as they gestured for me to join them. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the revelations that awaited me. "Sarah," they began, their voice low and steady, "your mother's story is more complicated than you can imagine. There are things she never wanted you to know, things that shaped her choices and ultimately led to her absence in your life." I felt my heart race as they continued, unraveling a tale that was as heartbreaking as it was enlightening. My mother had been part of a movement, a group of women fighting for their rights in a world that sought to silence them. But her journey had come at a cost, one that had left scars too deep to heal. She had faced betrayal, loss, and a choice that had haunted her for years. "She loved you, Sarah," my relative said, their eyes filled with compassion. "But she was caught in a web of circumstances that left her feeling trapped. She thought she was protecting you by leaving, but in doing so, she lost herself." As the pieces of my mother's story began to take shape, I felt a mix of anger and understanding. I had spent so long resenting her for her absence, but now I could see the complexity of her choices. I realized that the pain I had carried was not solely hers. It was a shared burden that had been passed down through generations. In that moment, I felt a shift within me. The shadows that had once threatened to consume me began to recede, replaced by a sense of clarity. I understood that my journey was not just about reclaiming my voice, it was also about forgiveness and understanding. I had the power to break the cycle of pain, to choose a different narrative for myself. As I left the cafe, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The truth had been unveiled, and while it was painful, it was also liberating. I was no longer defined by my past. I was a woman who had faced her demons and emerged stronger. I had found my voice, and now it was time to use it to honor the women who had come before me. I began to write again, pouring my heart into the pages as I reflected on the revelations of that day. I wrote about forgiveness, about the complexities of love and loss. I wrote about my mother, not as a figure of resentment, but as a woman who had fought her own battles. I wanted to share her story, to honor her struggles and the sacrifices she had made. With each word, I felt a sense of healing wash over me. I was no longer just an elderly woman reflecting on her past. I was a storyteller, weaving together the narratives of generations. My voice, once silenced, was now a powerful force, echoing through the pages of my life. I was determined to share my story with the world, to inspire others to confront their own truths and find their voices. As I prepared to share my writing with my community, I felt a mix of excitement and fear. What if they didn't understand? What if my story fell on deaf ears? But deep down, I knew that I had to take this leap of faith. My journey had been one of resilience and empowerment, and I wanted to inspire others to embrace their own narratives. The day of the reading arrived, and as I stood before the audience, I felt a rush of emotions. I looked out at the faces before me, a sea of hope and understanding. I took a deep breath and began to share my story, my voice trembling at first, but growing stronger with each word. I spoke of my journey, of the pain of abandonment, and the power of resilience. I shared my grandmother's letters, my mother's struggles, and the importance of reclaiming our voices. As I finished, the room erupted in applause, and I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. I had shared my truth, and in doing so, I had found a sense of belonging. The shadows of my past had been transformed into a source of strength, a reminder that I was not alone in my journey. In the days that followed, I received messages from women who had been touched by my story. They shared their own struggles, their own journeys of resilience and empowerment. I realized that my voice had the power to create a ripple effect, to inspire others to confront their own truths and reclaim their narratives. As I reflect on this journey, I am filled with gratitude for the women who came before me, for their strength and courage. I am grateful for the lessons I have learned, for the pain that has shaped me into the woman I am today. I am no longer just an elderly woman. I am a storyteller, a warrior, and a beacon of hope for those who feel invisible. And as I look to the future, I am filled with a renewed sense of purpose. I will continue to share my story, to lift others up, and to remind them that their voices matter. Together, we can create a world where the stories of women are celebrated, where the shadows of the past are transformed into a source of strength. Before I continue, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to know how far my story reaches. I can still feel the weight of that day pressing down on my chest, the moment when I stumbled upon the small, weathered box tucked away in the attic. It was like a ghost from my past, haunting me with its presence, waiting for me to uncover its secrets. My heart raced as I brushed away the layers of dust that had settled on it, a tangible reminder of the life I had long tried to forget. The box was unassuming, made of a dark wood that had faded over the years, its edges worn and splintered. But to me, it felt like a treasure chest, filled with the potential to unlock the mysteries of my life. I hesitated for a moment, my fingers hovering over the latch. What if it held memories too painful to bear? What if it was filled with regrets and sorrows that I had buried deep within me? But then I remembered the stories I had shared, the strength I had found in my vulnerability. I took a deep breath and lifted the lid, the creak echoing through the stillness of the attic, as if the house itself was holding its breath in anticipation. Inside, I found a jumble of letters, photographs, and small trinkets, each item a fragment of my past that had been carefully preserved. The first thing that caught my eye was a stack of letters tied together with a faded ribbon. My heart leaped as I recognized my grandmother's handwriting, the elegant loops and swirls that had always brought me comfort. I carefully untied the ribbon and began to read, each word pulling me deeper into a world I thought I had left behind. The letters spoke of love and loss, of dreams deferred and promises broken. They were filled with the hopes of a woman who had faced her own struggles, a woman who had fought for her voice in a world that often silenced her. As I read, I could almost hear her voice, soft and melodic, guiding me through the pages. She wrote about her life, her marriage, and the secrets that had been woven into the fabric of our family. I felt a connection to her that I had never fully grasped before, a thread that bound us together despite the years and distance. One letter stood out among the rest, a letter that hinted at a truth I had long suspected but never confirmed. It spoke of a family secret, one that had been passed down through generations, hidden away like a precious gem, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. My heart raced as I read the words, my mind racing with possibilities. What if this secret held the key to understanding my own life, my own struggles? What if it could finally explain the pain of abandonment but had haunted me for so long? I felt a surge of determination wash over me. I had spent too many years feeling like a shadow, invisible to the world around me. It was time to reclaim my voice, to confront the truths that had been buried beneath layers of silence and shame. I carefully placed the letters back into the box, my mind racing with questions and possibilities. I needed to know more. As I delved deeper into the contents of the box, I found photographs that captured moments of joy and sorrow, snapshots of a life lived in the shadows. There were images of my grandmother, her eyes sparkling with laughter, and others where her expression was clouded with sadness. I could see the weight of her burdens reflected in those photographs, and I felt a kinship with her that transcended time. I understood her struggles, her fight for recognition and love, because they mirrored my own. Among the photographs, I discovered a small locket, tarnished with age but still beautiful in its simplicity. I opened it carefully, revealing a tiny portrait of a young woman I didn't recognize. My heart raced as I realized this must be my mother, a woman I had never truly known. I felt a pang of longing as I traced the outline of her face with my fingers, wishing I could reach through time and connect with her to understand the choices she had made that had led to my own abandonment. With each discovery, the pieces of my past began to fall into place. I felt a sense of urgency to uncover the truth, to confront the shadows that had loomed over my family for far too long. I began to piece together the stories my grandmother had shared in her letters, the fragments of my mother's life that had been left unexplored. I could feel the weight of their experiences pressing down on me, urging me to continue my investigation. As I began to connect the dots, I realized that my grandmother had been more than just a storyteller. She had been a guardian of our family's history. Her letters were not only a testament to her struggles, but also a roadmap for me to navigate my own journey. I felt a sense of responsibility to honor her legacy, to ensure that her voice and the voices of all the women who had come before me were not lost to time. The attic became my sanctuary, a sacred space where I could explore my emotions and confront the truths I had long avoided. I spent hours sifting through the remnants of my family's past, each item sparking memories and reflections that brought me closer to understanding my own identity. I felt like an archaeologist, carefully excavating the layers of my history, unearthing the stories that had shaped me into the woman I was today. Every day brought new revelations. I discovered old journals filled with my grandmother's thoughts and dreams, her hopes for a better future. I read about her struggles with societal expectations, her desire to break free from the constraints that had bound her. I found comfort in her words, knowing that she had faced similar battles, that she too had felt the sting of invisibility. I began to write my own reflections alongside her words, documenting my journey of discovery and healing. I poured my heart onto the pages, sharing my fears and triumphs, my moments of doubt and clarity. It was as if I was engaging in a dialogue with her, sharing my own experiences while honoring hers. I felt her presence guiding me, urging me to keep pushing forward, to embrace my truth. As I continued my investigation, I reached out to family members, seeking their perspectives and insights. I wanted to understand how our stories intertwined, how the threads of our lives were woven together. Some were hesitant to share, their voices trembling with the weight of unspoken truths. But I persisted, determined to uncover the full tapestry of our history. During one of these conversations, I sat across from my aunt, a woman who had always been a source of strength in my life. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of sadness and resilience as she recounted her own experiences of loss and betrayal. She spoke of the family secrets that had been passed down, the whispers that had lingered in the corners of our gatherings. I could see the pain etched on her face, the scars of a lifetime of trying to reconcile her own identity with the expectations placed upon her. Sometimes it feels like we're living in the shadows of our past, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But we have the power to break free, to rewrite our stories. Her words resonated deeply within me, igniting a fire of determination. I realized that I was not alone in this journey. We were all fighting our own battles, grappling with the weight of our family's history. Together, we could confront the injustices that had been inflicted upon us, reclaiming our voices and our narratives. As the weeks passed, I felt a sense of urgency building within me. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that the secrets of my family were not just my burden to bear. They were a collective history that demanded to be acknowledged. I began to envision a future where our stories could be shared openly, where the pain of the past could be transformed into a source of strength and empowerment. With each discovery, I felt the shackles of my own invisibility begin to loosen. I was no longer just an elderly woman recounting her life. I was a beacon of hope for others who had felt silenced and abandoned. I wanted to create a space where our stories could be shared, where the voices of women like my grandmother and my mother could be honored and celebrated. I began to organize community gatherings, inviting women from all walks of life to come together and share their narratives. We would sit in a circle, each voice adding to the tapestry of our collective experience. I felt a sense of camaraderie as we shared our struggles, our triumphs, and our hopes for the future. It was a space of healing, where the weight of our pasts could be transformed into a source of strength. As I stood before these women, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was no longer just a storyteller. I was a facilitator of change, a catalyst for empowerment. I shared my own journey, the discoveries I had made, and the importance of reclaiming our voices. I could see the spark of recognition in their eyes, the understanding that we were all connected through our shared experiences. With each gathering, I felt the weight of my past lift, replaced by a sense of belonging and community. I was no longer invisible, I was part of something greater than myself. The stories we shared became a powerful reminder that we were not alone in our struggles, that our voices mattered, and that together we could create a world where our narratives were celebrated. As I continued to explore the depths of my family's history, I felt a sense of urgency to confront the final pieces of the puzzle. I needed to understand the truth behind the family secret that had been hinted at in my grandmother's letters. It was time to face the shadows that had lingered for far too long. I reached out to distant relatives, seeking their insights and perspectives. I wanted to piece together the fragments of our family's history to uncover the truth that had been buried beneath layers of silence. With each conversation, I felt the weight of the past pressing down on me, urging me to keep pushing forward. As I delved deeper, I discovered that the secret was rooted in a tragic love story, one that had shaped the course of our family's history. It was a tale of forbidden love, of choices made in the name of duty and societal expectations. I could feel the heartbreak echoing through the generations, the pain of lost opportunities and unfulfilled dreams. With each revelation, I felt a sense of catharsis wash over me. I was no longer just a passive observer of my family's history. I was an active participant, reclaiming my narrative and the narratives of those who had come before me. I began to understand that the pain of abandonment I had felt was not just my own. It was a collective experience, woven into the very fabric of our family. As I pieced together the story of my mother's life, I felt a sense of empathy and understanding for the choices she had made. I could see the struggles she had faced, the weight of societal expectations that had burdened her. I realized that her decision to leave was not a reflection of her love for me. It was a desperate attempt to break free from the chains that had bound her. In those final days of discovery, I felt a sense of liberation. I was no longer defined by my past, I was empowered by it. I understood that the shadows of my family's history did not have to dictate my future. I could choose to rewrite my narrative, to embrace my voice, and share my story with the world. As I prepared to share my findings with my community, I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. Would they understand the depth of my journey? Would they recognize the importance of reclaiming our narratives? I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this was not just my story. It was a collective experience, a testament to the resilience of women throughout generations. The day of the gathering arrived, And as I stood before the women who had become my sisters in this journey, I felt a surge of emotion. I shared my discoveries, the letters and photographs that had unearthed the truth of my family's history. I spoke of the struggles we had faced, the pain of abandonment, and the power of reclaiming our voices. As I finished, I looked out at the faces before me, a tapestry of hope and understanding. I could see the spark of recognition in their eyes, the understanding that we were all connected through our shared experiences. It was a moment of catharsis, a release of the weight we had carried for far too long. In that moment, I realized that I had not only reclaimed my voice, I had also created a space for others to do the same. Together, we had transformed our pain into a source of strength, a reminder that we were not alone in our struggles. We were a community of women, united by our stories and our resilience. As I looked around the room, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was no longer just an elderly woman. I was a storyteller, a warrior, and a beacon of hope for those who felt invisible. My journey had been one of resilience and empowerment, and I was determined to continue sharing my story, to lift others up, and to remind them that their voices mattered. Before I continue, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to know how far my story reaches. If my story touched you, subscribe to the channel and share it so more people never give up on hope.